Welcome back to the 9th and penultimate video in this tutorial series on writing unit and integration tests for your React and Redux web applications. Now, in the last video, we looked at simulating events using Jest and Enzyme, and in today's video, we're going to be writing our first tests for methods on our classes. And this is something that's very useful to understand and implement because it will help you achieve better test coverage. Now, before I write a single line of code, if you haven't already, I want to ask you guys to check out the official playlist for this video series. You can find that either by clicking on the link I will post in the description of this video. Alternatively, you can search for our channel on YouTube. You can find that, which is Simple Tut, and find that playlist for yourself. Of course, I'd also like to let you guys know that we have an official GitHub repository for this project, and at the end of each video, I am pushing the code to this repository so you can examine it in your own time if you want to. You can find that by visiting our official GitHub page, which is github.com/simpletut, and finding this testing repository. There will be a direct link in the description of this video. And as always, I want to ask you guys to just show us a bit of support. Like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, comment, leave comments. All your feedback and support go a long way to helping me continue to bring this kind of content. Now, of course, as you will already know, if you have been watching the previous videos of this series, we have been working on a project, and this is a wireframe of the project we've been working on. I'm not going to go through it again, but what I want to point out, because it is relevant to this video, is the way that it basically works is we have this button. It makes an asynchronous request to an external API, it goes out, fetches some data in the form of posts, and then we render them out on the page. If we actually check out the application, which I already have set up and running here in the background, I'm just going to refresh this. If I click this button, get posts, it just goes out and fetches the posts. Now, if you have followed previous videos in this tutorial series, you'll know that the way that this is currently working is that we have our main app component. And on our app component, we're importing various other components, one of which is our shared button. And the way that it works is we are emitting an event on click to the parent component, which is our app component, and we are capturing that event and using it to dispatch an action with Redux that goes out and fetches our posts. Now, what I want to actually show you how to do in this tutorial is how that we can test methods on our classes. And this is really useful when you're looking at things like test coverage. So what I want to do is I want to show you how to test two different types of methods that you might write on your classes within your general development and in your projects. There's one type of class that might update the state within your component. So I want to show you how to write a method that and then check that it has updated the state correctly. And then I want to show you how to write another type of method where you just return some kind of value. Now, the example that I want to give you in this instance and that we're going to implement is actually we're going to hide this button when we've actually fetched the post, because there's really no reason for us to have that button there when we fetch the posts, right? Because we're not going to go out and fetch different posts every time you click it. It's just going to go out and fetch the exact same type of post. So just to show you that visually, if we go over to the browser, if I click get posts, currently it just we go out, we render the post, that's great, but we still have this button to get the posts again. So if I click that, nothing happens. It's actually making an additional call in the background. There's really no reason for it to do that, so let's remove the button when we have posts. Now, I do want to just point out here that the better way of doing this obviously would be something along the lines of what we've done here. So we only return. So obviously here on our app component, we're actually mapping through posts and rendering them. We do something similar here because I'm only rendering this return function if we have posts. So I do something similar if we do not. So for example, In this instance, I could say post.length. If it equals 0, then that is the only occasion we want to show this button. So that basically what that means is that if we don't have any posts, we render the button. If we do have posts, we hide the button, but we render through those posts and render them on the page. So if I now come back over to the browser, if I click on Get Posts, we hide the button, and of course we then render the posts themselves. But what I want to do in this tutorial is I don't want to use that logic. I want to have a method updating something in the state that basically toggles whether this button displays or not. So let's go ahead and implement that. So the first thing that I'm going to do is outside of my class, I'm going to create some initial state. It's just going to be a constant containing an object. We're going to say hide btn equals false. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just within my constructor here, I'm going to say this.state, and we'll use the spread operator to just define our initial state. And what we need here is that method I just spoke to you about. So we need a method. I'm going to say example method, and we're just going to say that it updates state. Okay, and within this method, all we're going to do is this.setState, and we're going to change the value of our hide btn. And what I'll do is I'll just destructure from state. So I'll just say const this.state, and I'll destructure hide btn. And all we're going to do is just take that and just toggle that value. So all we need to do here is, of course, this is where we're actually dispatching that action. So after we've dispatched the action, we'll trigger this method here that's going to update the state. And then to actually update the UI and hide the button, within my render method here, I'm going to destructure from state our hide button value so that I can basically implement that here to hide the button. So if it's set to true, we're actually going to hide the button. So let's go over to the browser again. Let's click on Get Posts, and as you can see, it works just as it was before. We are indeed hiding the button, right? So that works fine, but how can we actually test this method, right? How can we test it? So we have all our tests for this particular file, which is app.js, in app.test.js. Now again, for those of you that are just joining, we have covered a lot already. Of course, as I've mentioned before, this is the 9th video in this series. So I'm not going to go over everything that we've already done, but just to summarize it so that you can follow this tutorial if you are just joining us. We of course have this setup function, and what this is doing is it's basically just running a shallow render of our component, and then it's just returning it. And we have a before each within our main describe function, and all we're doing here is we're running that setup function. So we're declaring a wrapper variable, and then within a before each, so before each test, we're running that setup function and basically passing our shallow render to this wrapper variable, and then we're using that wrapper variable containing our shallow render within each one of our tests. Alright, so that's really all you need to know. If you followed the previous tutorials and you already have the project on your system, you've written the same code as I have as we've gone through the series, then I'm sure you're just going to follow along in this video. But if you are just joining, I am going to refer to this wrapper variable, and I just want you guys to know that all it contains is a shallow render of our component. So let's go ahead and actually just write our test. So again, all I want to do here is just check. I want to basically create an instance of this class that gives me access to all the methods on it. I want to then just fire this method and check that it has updated the state correctly. what that basically means, what I'm saying is I want to check that the state value of hide button is set to true. So let's go ahead and write that. So I'm going to say it, and basically I want to say that this method should update state as expected, right? So let's write our test. So as I've mentioned already, we need to first create an instance of our class. So let's create our instance. So I'm going to say class instance. That is a const. And again, I'm going to reference that wrapper that contains our shallow render. And I'm going to create an instance of my class. It's as easy as that. Now, all I need to do is actually just fire that method. So to do that, I'll just grab my class instance and I'll fire that function, or method rather, right? So I'm actually using it. I'm using my instance and I'm actually triggering that method. And then I can go and have a look at what that state is. So I'm going to say const new state, and I'm going to grab my class instance. I'm going to look at the state of hide btn. And then we can make our assertion. So I'm going to expect that our new state to be, and we can actually make our assertion here. So we're expecting it to, of course, be set to true. So now let's go ahead and check our terminal. And as you can see, our test is passing, right? And again, let's come back over to our test, to our actual component, and let's actually comment out where we update the state. And let's make sure that our test is failing, because it should be set to false. So it shouldn't be passing. And there you go. So it received false, it expected true. Let's come back over, uncomment that, and you're going to see that the test should be passing again. So we know that that test is working. And it's as easy as that. You can test a method on your class, and it is simple as that. Now, I already mentioned I want to show you another example of another method that returns a value. So let's just create another method on this same class. So I'm going to say example method that just returns a value. And what we're going to do is we're just going to pass it some number and something very simple, which is going to return that number, and we'll increment a value like 1 or something. So really simple. Let's grab hold of the name of the method, and let's just create another test. So you may already guess how this is going to work. We're just going to say that this method should return value as expected. And again, all we need to do, we can copy this line here. In fact, we can copy, I won't copy it so that I can just show you guys again. So first of all, we need to create an instance. I'm going to say class instance equals our we're using that shallow render again. So I'm referencing our wrapper instance. We need to create an instance of our class. And then I can actually use that method. So I'm going to say new value, because we're not checking the state in this instance. We're just going to check that it returns a value. So all I need to do here is off this instance, we want to basically use this method here, because it's basically a function at this point. It's just a method on a class that we can use. And this expects an argument. We're going to pass it 6. And then I can actually make some assertions. So I can say I expect the new value. And again, if we check what we were doing, we just took that number. So we've paused 6, we plussed 1, and we return that value. So 6 should be 1. So let's say to be 7, right? That's what it should be. Again, let's come over, check our test, and it's pausing. Let's come back over to our app component, and instead of adding 1, let's add 2. Let's come back over here, and it's erroring because it expected 7, it got 8 because we have changed that to 2. Let's change that back to 1, and our test should be pausing, and indeed it is. So I've just showed you 2 methods that you can use basically to test methods on your class. Again, there's only ever really going to be 2 types of methods that you test, one that updates the state and another that just returns some kind of value or basically a new piece of state. So that kind of also brings us to the end of this video tutorial. So it's a good time for us to actually go ahead and commit. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say git status. You can see these are the 2 files we've updated. Let's go ahead and commit that. So git add all, git commit. And as usual, as you can see, I've been working on a feature branch and I've committed the work. So at the end of this video tutorial, I will be pushing and merging that with master. Once again, I'd just like to thank you guys for following this video tutorial and indeed this entire series. The next video is going to be the final video in this series, the 10th video, which has been a long time coming. I feel like we've covered so much. And what I'm basically going to be talking about in the next video is Git hooks, basically pre-push. This is basically how we can run all our tests when we try and commit or push our code to our repository or a branch in our repository, which is best practice. We shouldn't be pushing any work that breaks tests. So I'm going to show you how to basically run pre-push in the next and final video of this video series, which you can expect very soon, depending on when you're watching. Of course, if you're watching this video at some point in the future, there's a good chance that the video is already on our playlist. Again, please check out that playlist I've already talked to you guys about. There'll be links in the description to that, to our playlist, to our GitHub repository. But as always, I'd just like to thank you guys for following. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Again, your support goes a long way, helping us bring you this kind of content. Have a great day. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.